Robert Plank Show, episode 120. Stress is just adaptation. The impact of the human stress response with Mary Wingo. Welcome back to the Robert Plank Show, where we talk about being a home-based entrepreneur and so much more. Today's guest is Dr. Mary Wingo. She's the author of The Impact of the Human Stress Response, and in her book she talks about the root causes of stress and how to manage it effectively, why the stress response is essential for helping to adapt to one's environment, the fascinating biology of human stress, the 5 major causes of stress in modernized society, and how to protect your health. Learn how to avoid overloading one body's stress response. Lots of cool stuff. Welcome to the show, Mary.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Robert.
So I understand that you talk about stress and stuff like that.
Yes, absolutely. That is what I'm about.
Cool. So, I mean, I work from home. I don't know about you, but I get stressed about stuff all the time. And I think it might be feel like as I'm getting older, either the stress is more, or maybe I'm just more aware of it. So, I mean, what's the answer? I mean, is stress the thing that we need to just like manage or minimize or ignore, or can we direct it into something good? I mean, what's the answer to this whole stress problem?
Well, first off is understanding the actual definition of stress, Robert. The definition of stress, and it took a very long time to actually come up with a workable definition. But the definition is this: it's the rate of adjustment that you undergo, that you undergo in order to adapt to whatever environment that you happen to find yourself in. So the key is here is that there's two aspects, there's two sides of stress. There's the actual, like, since we're talking about people, the human being, and the second component is the environment. So it can actually be, a matter of personal will, or it can actually be something that's out of your reach, and that's a problem with the environment. You just have to alter or change your environment.
Okay, so are you saying that? So I mean, for example, like if someone transitioned from a day job to being a full-time entrepreneur, or they changed or had a big life change or something like that. So are you saying that like that is, I guess, what stress is? And so if someone like goes through that stress and overcomes it versus the stress kind of hangs around or gets worse, I mean, what's happening there versus someone who's actually dealing with it?
Okay. You've touched on a really important point. Yes, okay. Ultimately, organisms are only supposed to be subjected to stress periodically, okay, sporadically. But the way that modernized society is structured, a lot of us have grinding, not necessarily horrible, like, life threatening stressors. It's not like a bear is chasing us like every second of the day. But for most of us, these nagging, somewhat smaller stressors, well, there are some large stressors too, but that just go on day after day after day. And it's relentless. And what happens and our stress mechanisms are just that. They are how we adapt, okay? They are our adaptive mechanisms. It's not just adrenaline, it's not just cortisol, it is a whole cascade of physical responses. So the key is is to be able to do what you can to try to resolve the stress and not keep a nagging, incessant exposure day after day after day to it. Because when that happens, that is when you get stress related mental illness and physical disease. In fact, it's an exploding phenomenon in our society.
So could you kind of walk us through maybe like an example or a case study of someone who you dealt with who had just a really bad problem with stress, and you kind of changed their ways and fixed it up a little bit?
Oh, I can use myself.
Perfect.
I'll use myself because ultimately, when I was researching, I mean, this is decades in the making. This isn't something. This isn't a book that I just sort of came up with. This is something that I have cultivated over 20 years, and because there's really not a lot of hardcore really good stuff out there. I had to sort of practice on myself a little and see how see how that worked just for me, okay, and see if this was in relation to human beings in general. But for me, it was all about simplicity. It was following probably the greatest American philosopher of our time, Henry David Thoreau, who was the guy who actually coined simplicity, okay, or simple living. Literally eliminating details and complications from one's life, one by one, by one, by one, by one. And ultimately, some out of a trial and error, I found myself, especially when I left the US, because I realized that my country, my culture, was causing me a lot of stress personally. I'm a very sensitive person. A lot of, thinking nerdy types are. And ultimately, I couldn't have finished this book living in the US, in the environment in the US. I had to get to a less stressful environment, and that's here in Ecuador. And it was like another person wrote it. It just literally flowed out.
So, I mean, why Ecuador? And was this the kind of situation where did you? I'm just kind of wondering, like, so you're from the U.S., you were in Texas, and so you're saying that moving to Ecuador was a result of your stress. You didn't like the
Yes.
environment here, and the environment there was better.
Well, yeah, I mean, I knew as a this is like 10, 12 years ago. I knew as a scientist back then that the structure of our environment was killing a lot of people early, and causing a lot of disability, taking a lot of breadwinners from families, causing a lot of family impoverishment. I mean, I saw this, and I couldn't really put my finger. I mean, I like I said, this has been many, many years in the cultivation of this meta-analytic concept. But I realized that my country, for my particular sensitive constitution, was very, very toxic for me, and I realized that it was stunting my growth. And I so 10, 12 years ago, I had ultimately made the decision to leave. I didn't know how or where, but I had, like, basically changed my life up to facilitate an easy transition. And when a friend of mine retired down here, she's an older lady, about like 3 years ago, I asked if I could come visit her over Christmas, and I stayed for a month. And I realized that it was a very, very different place. And I packed up and came back. I mean, I packed up, left Texas, came back 3 months later.
Cool. I mean, sounds like an exciting adventure. So, so you have this book, and I understand that you have a way of defining like the type of stress. I guess there are five major causes of stress. You say.
Yes, absolutely. And when you're talking about like stress for yourself, you had mentioned that as you get older, you felt like you were experiencing more and more stress. Well, basically, our modernized society, and you don't see this to near the extent here in Ecuador, and this is where I was able to sort of really formulate and crystallize some of my concepts. But there are five major causes of stress that come from living in a westernized society. Number one, and this is probably what affects you and your listeners a lot, is simply complexity. And when I mean that, let me elaborate. It's undue pressure and taxation on our executive mental functioning, on our frontal lobes, okay, on our ability to plan, okay, on our, it's called working memory, and it's our frontal lobes, which is the part of the brain behind your forehead and your eyeballs, is is like the newest part of our cortex, and it's very fragile. But it is our primary stress response organ, believe it or not. And how that's so is that it allows us to plan, strategize, and attenuate and eliminate stressors in our environment. It also allows us to alter our environment. So, for instance, if we are cold and we have a cold stressor, we're in freezing temperatures, we don't sit there and freeze. We've created clothing, we've created fires, we've created, elaborate shelters, stuff that other animals, I mean, to an extent, are limited in doing. And with that, it's a very, very precious resource we have as people. But unfortunately, if we, as we subject ourselves to increased levels of stressor over long periods of time, okay, so high cortisol levels, a different set of receptors get activated in our frontal lobes, and basically it starts to shut everything down. So this is why stress, when we subject ourselves to stress, it's very, very bad for our emotional and mental regulation, our problem solving ability. So this is it's very important to take very good care of our cognitive resources, because this is how all mental illness starts. I mean, this is how it all begins,
So
when our frontal lobes start crapping out.
So in this case, would this be like if, for example, like if like I'm so overwhelmed with like putting out all the fires, have so many things going on, spread so thin that I can't even think. Is that what this is describing?
Yeah, yes, and we Americans especially wear this type of overburden as a badge of honor. And honestly, the thing is, I mean, ultimately, what happens? I mean, if you just want to look at it from an economic standpoint, this type of habit, which of course, I was a typical overachiever. I got my PhD very young. So I know all this it ultimately costs you more. Is ultimately going to put a huge financial strain, if not, well, other types of strains as well, on you for that, as well as on your health. So this is not a good way to approach problem solving and adaptation.
So what is the good way? And is there a way? Is there a way to kind of have my cake and eat it too? Is there a way to kind of like be a productivity machine, be an overachiever, but still kind of be relaxed and not be overwhelmed all the time?
Well, let me tell you what has worked for me. Okay, let me, there's again, this is all extremely new developments that you know, plethora of stress researchers, scientists, investigators, social scientists have come up collectively over the last over the last 50, 60 years, but really over the last maybe 5 or 10 years. And for me, what works is, if you're going to be an overachiever, if you're going to consume yourself with an activity like I do, like you do, of high performance, you've got to treat yourself as an athlete preparing for the Olympics or a marathon. Okay, so because ultimately, sports, are we exercise stress on the body. And this has been very, very well studied and looked at. If you want to maintain high performance, you've got to simplify other parts of your life. So you've got to watch what you eat, like like an athlete would. You've got to watch your sleeping. If you've got various toxic relationships, you've got to do whatever you can to attenuate this. Um, the book that I wrote is basically it's a meta-analysis of around 100 years of work. So this was going to take when I wrote this. I knew it was going to take a big chunk out of me. I knew it was going to be a pound of flesh, so to speak. So yes, I had to be very, very immaculate in my habits and my other parts of my life in order to subsidize the adaptation of the very big demanding part. Does that sound clear?
Yeah, I get. Yeah, it does, and I like the whole analogy of the athlete and the marathon, and like I I haven't been able to run for a few months because I broke my ankle a few months ago. Like every morning I'd wake up and I'd go for a run, and I was almost like looking forward to it. And I think back to like I only played sports for a few years as a kid, but it was always like the the game that we were the next game that we were leading up to and practicing for and stuff. It was like it was this kind of like stressful event coming up, but it was good stress, and it was like there was always that element of nervousness and anticipation, but it was like it was the good kind and not the dread kind, right? Not like something that I was like, oh no, only 4 days left, only 3 days left. It was like it was almost like Christmas morning coming up, right? It was like it's a few days away. I wish it was right now.
Well, actually surprising, okay, and this is something that sort of, I don't know, kind of flies in the face of what we've all been told about stress for the last 20, 30 years, is that stress is just adaptation. There's nothing, it's just a mechanism. Just like breathing is a mechanism or heart rate is a mechanism. It is a set of mechanisms that help us adapt, period. Now, the difference is that, like, say, for oftentimes good stressors are, like I said before, limited in scope. They're not chronic. Okay, it's not a grinding activity that you do all the time. It is sporadic. So yes, okay. So you're looking forward to getting a real good workout. This Saturday, and you look forward to it, and it's good, and it ends, and then so you're able to reap the benefits of adaptation, hopefully without the wear and tear of overuse from your mind and from the rest of your physiology.
So it's like I guess so. Would you say the secret is to do these things in short bursts? I mean, it's like it's not like we're having we're not. It's not like we're working out all day long. It's not like a constant thing. It's like I'm looking forward to this little thing. Now it comes up. Now it's over, and then I guess the next event or the next milestone, I guess, is what you're saying.
Yes, yes, and like I said before, if it's a very like I said, like for me, it was writing. Basically the benchmark book of medicine and physiology. I mean, that's ultimately what this book is. For me, it was again treating it like a marathon, treating it like you're an elite athlete, and really doing immaculate self care that an athlete would do, and then just doing it periodically. And with that, you develop adaptation. You become stronger. It's like a muscle.
So are you seeing like a universal like way that this is going wrong, or are you seeing like a mistake that just everyone you come across who doesn't have your techniques, is there just a big mistake everyone's making as far as dealing with stress?
Yes, and we haven't gone over the other four. I'm not sure if we have time in this episode. I might have to come back again.
Might have to.
But
Maybe come back one time per item, right? Five
yes,
times coming
absolutely.
back.
Okay. Um, but yes, this is the reason I ended up writing the book. I actually quit science 10 years ago, but I mean, I was still an academic. I fully kept up with, every, single, major development. And this is a huge field. There's probably minimum 100,000 refereed papers that have been published over the last 50, 75 years. This is a very, very well studied topic, but it's not well understood. And I actually didn't want to write it, but the way things are getting in our society, in westernized society, modernized society in general, with how we are in this point in history, and basically, watching, many folks in our culture die premature deaths, become disabled from preventable stress related diseases, become bankrupt from dealing with stress related diseases. Nobody else was doing this, and I figured, guys, no one else gonna find. Okay, I'll just do it. And so that's what sort of propelled me to do this. But yes, people don't have the vocabulary, and with these five major causes of stress in modernized society, what it is, I wanted to like nail down in a very, very easy to understand way that almost anybody in the world can understand. Okay, so you don't have to have formal education, you don't have to be a medical professional, you don't even have to be, all that literate. Okay, to be able to understand what stress actually is, And then when you understand what it is and what the major classifications of stress that kill people and make people sick and bankrupt people are, then you can actually make an itemized list and pick out, just like you would like a food diary, or like, a money spending diary if you're on a budget, and then just one by one pluck them out, just pick them out.
So
That's the
so
only way to do it. That's the only way to do it.
so what you're saying is, instead of trying to conquer this huge giant, problem of stress, you instead break down the problem and then attack the little pieces that are left.
Yes, and for the average person living in, modernized society, this might be several hundred items. It might take several weeks. If you're really serious about this, you might need to have help from your close family and friends, because you may not even be fully aware of what you're doing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So we're starting to wind down. We're starting to run out of time, but I want to make sure that we get the five major causes listed. I know that we don't have a lot of time to unpack them, but I would feel bad if we left before you were able to explain all five of these real quick.
Okay, okay. I'm going to try to run through these as fast as I can, Robert.
Awesome.
Okay, so number one is overloading our cognitive resources, overtaxing of working memory. Okay, so we already went over that one. Number two is living in an unequal society. The very, very strong correlation between living in an in a society that is unequal, and the proliferation of stress related diseases, especially in men. Okay, so again, where we have the 0.1%, grabbing up all the resources, and the rest of us are, literally scrambling for breadcrumbs in history. This is basically the recipe for revolution. I mean, this is just how human beings are put together socially. Number three is loss of social capital, which that's social support. Ever since, actually, since the Industrial Revolution, our participation in social groups, I mean, whether it's religious, social, political, or just hanging out, family and friends, um, the time, the actual time spent doing that has basically shriveled down to nothing. And because we are meant to be social creatures, and because when we deal in packs and herds, and in groups, we are less vulnerable to the individually to the ravages of society. So that's a very big one as well. Kind of changing gears a little bit. Four is the derangement or loss of the human biome, which are all those little critters, little microorganisms of different, many, many different sorts that exist in our gut, on our skin, and in our orifices. And what they do, they're actually extensions, functional extensions of our organ systems. They help create vitamins. They function in cellular growth, in endocrine, in immune signaling, and they're implicated in many, many types of disease when these critters get deranged and they're not able to do their job. So basically, you lose some of your functioning bodily systems when the biome gets deranged, and a lot of us have this problem. And then number five, in general, is chemical stressors. So four kind of segues into five. And so you understand that a lot of just the chemicals that we have in our household, at our work, the processed food that we eat, the pharmaceuticals we take, a lot of these didn't exist 20, 30, 50, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. Okay. So we don't have the metabolic machinery, especially in our liver, to be able to break these things down efficiently. So what happens is, we're exposed to it, and we go into a stress response to try to deal with it. Okay, so we have that, and then the other part of the chemical stress aspect is actual exposure to pollution, to the air, soil, and water. That's a very, very potent stressor as well, and results in many, many deaths. Okay, so those are the major five, and a lot of people don't think of these. They may think of reason one as stress, But reasons two, three, four, and five, a lot of people they just don't know. They didn't don't have the vocabulary, and so that's one thing I'm really trying to set out to do is be able to give people some real actionable vocabulary to work with.
Dang. So, I mean, it sounds like, yeah, there's all these different sources of stress that, I mean, I had no idea that that they were coming from. So, I mean, I like the idea of your book and the things you have to say in it. So, could you tell everyone about your book, what it is, where to get it, and any other websites where people can find out about you?
Absolutely. Well, your listeners can go to my website, marywingo.com, and they can download some actionable steps for free with a training video to just get started. They don't have to buy anything. And then there's tons of free learning materials and information. Okay. My book is the first book, basically, uh, I guess in I guess in modern history that is is a meta analysis, is an analysis of the biological, psychological, sociological, and you know political and economic aspects regarding the human stress experience. If people want to pick up a copy, and it's a very inexpensive book, I've priced it to where almost anybody in the world can afford this. So, this isn't something that, if someone doesn't have a lot, that, they're going to be cut off from. They can get lots of information from me. But they can pick it up off my website, marywingo.com, or from amazon.com.
And then one more time, what is the title of the book so everyone knows to get it?
The impact of the human stress response.
Awesome. And so, yeah, this whole subject of stress, I mean, I think at least for me, it's one of those things where it's, I forget it's there, and the times that I forget it's there, then I end up having problems. So I think this is a really important subject. I think you had a lot of good things to say, and I'm really glad that you came on the show today, Mary.
Totally my pleasure. I look forward to talking to you again, Robert.
Same here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Robert Plank Show. Be sure to go to robertplankshow.com to like us on Facebook and robertplankshow.com/iTunes to subscribe to the show, rate, and review it. Thanks a ton.